Hey everybody, welcome to Engaging the Phenomenon. And today we have an amazing guest, the Mr. Sean Cahill. How are you, Sean? Welcome.
I'm doing good, James. How are you?
I'm great over here. As you said over there, you got it nice and cool weather, and it's like starting to sweep over here in New York, getting hot, man.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
appreciative of our weather front that we have, keeping it nice in the 60s for us here.
oh man, I wish. Anyways, I'm so glad you took the time to come on. I really appreciate it. Uh, it's been hard to get in touch with you the last couple of weeks. You've been all over international media. It's incredible. So, I know everybody in the community is super supportive and grateful that you're able to speak out to the greater public with such a sound and rational mind on this topic. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be there. It's a pleasure to be here, but it's really an honor to help represent folks. So it's a very careful, I don't know, careful time that I try to involve myself in, because I know a lot of people are hanging on my words. A lot of people are now, I realize, are taking what I have to say, and they're informing their own worldview with it. So it's something that I take very seriously. So
Absolutely.
it's yeah.
Yeah, just so listeners here have an understanding of who you are, can you just give like a small explanation of your background?
Certainly. I'm a retired U.S. Navy Chief Master at Arms. I was stationed on board the USS Princeton in that capacity in 2004 when we encountered what's now infamously known as the Tic Tac. My position on the ship was basically Chief of Law Enforcement. I happened to also be on the bridge during that time, helping coordinate ship movements with Senior Chief Kevin Day, who had acquired these contacts on his radar that he was trying to determine whether they were anomalous or whether they were ghost tracks or whether they were real. Once we went through a series of quality assurance and checks and determined that these were real tracks, a sortie of F-18s was sent from the USS Nimitz. They were Commander David Fravor and his wingman pilot, Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich. They were able to put their eyes on these Tic Tac things. They saw them over something shaped the size of a 747 in the water that seemed to be roiling, or an area of water, I should say, that was roiling. And these Tic Tacs were flitting around it. They were approximately 30 feet long, and Commander Fravor and his wingman returned to the USS Nimitz. Another sortie was sent out later that had a FLIR pod and camera on board, and they were able to capture some visual data for us this time. And so we had corroborating radar data over a course of days. We had visual data from one set of pilots, and we had visual and radio optical data from another pilot. Later on, the night before we received that information on board the Princeton via video on our email, I had seen 5 to 7 lights up in the sky, approximately 2,000 feet off the port bow at about 45 degrees. And they were they were in the sky, and they were turning toward, when I saw them, they started turning towards a center point, and each of one of them blinked out individually. And I'd never seen anything like that. I turned to the lookout that was next to me and asked if he had seen it too, and he said he had. From that point on, I went inside the skin of the ship and went about with the exercise, because Kevin wasn't on watch at the time, so I wasn't going to wake him up for that, because I wasn't sure what I had seen, and I had other things to do. Subsequently, the next day we saw the videos, and they were fantastic. We're all familiar with them then, or with them now, I should say. We get to see some of the 5 observables in there and corroborate some of the things that were told by the pilots and the radar operators. That night, we had an operations intelligence briefing, and we treated it very nonchalantly. A little joke was told at the beginning of the presentation with a Mars Attacks type alien going across the PowerPoint. And the captain said, well, we had our fun this week. Let's get back to work. And until 2017, that was the last I ever heard or saw of it in an official capacity.
When you had that sighting the night before, what was your reaction or your feelings about that at the time?
I thought it was fantastic. I knew that what I had seen wasn't a normal aircraft that I was used to, or a meteorite, or any other phenomena of the sky, or balloons, etc. seagulls, all of those things. I knew that what I was looking at were highly luminous objects, and they were moving in a fashion that didn't correspond to anything within our arsenal. It didn't seem to make sense. Um, at the time of the sighting, I was more of a fan of UFOs and things like that. I was interested in them, kind of as a just a very light hobby. I watched stuff like that on TV and read some books here and there. But it was when I saw it, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was amazing. The
Yeah.
next day when I saw the video, again, I thought we made Roswell look like an inconsequential
Yeah.
historical blip. But then the way we reacted to it, because I'd been in the Navy for 8.5 years at that time. I made Chief Petty Officer a few months before. And while I wasn't the saltiest sailor around, you know, I'd seen my fair share of stuff, and I'd never seen anything like this. It was nuts. And the way we reacted just convinced me, well, this must be American tech at the time. I was like, there's
Yeah.
no way that all of these professionals could just be like, whatever. But I didn't understand at the time the stigma that we've been fighting the last few years since I've been involved in this, and how thick it was, especially within military culture. So we're getting around it now, but it was very prevalent then. It turns out that it wasn't because these were classified DARPA programs. These were just people that were safeguarding their careers by keeping their mouth shut about something that was strange.
Now, what was it like for you? You said, this kind of disappeared from your life in a sense, at least that encounter did, until 2017. So,
Yeah.
what was that like for you in 2017 when this kind of just blew up in the New York Times and they had the showcase the Nimitz event?
It was very surreal. I had come home from that exercise, and I had told family and friends about what we had seen. I described it to them in detail. I'd spoken to other shipmates who had family members on board the Nimitz who were able to corroborate that yes, those events were going on, and some other details that came along with it. But in 2017, I was blown away. I had a friend of mine who's a active duty Master Chief Petty Officer call me and say, "Hey, man, that UFO thing you told us about years ago, it's on the cover of the New York Times." And I was like, what do you mean? And I immediately went and read it, and I got chills. I got emotional. The validation. I whispered to myself on my deck, "You're not effing crazy, Sean."
Yeah.
You know, I can feel it welling up right now because it was heavy. I couldn't believe that I was reading what I was reading, and that there was a governmental program that ended up, coalescing because of this event and others. And then finding out about Lou, I said this on somebody else's show the other day. I started a 9-month investigation because I didn't meet Lou for 9 months. And I did everything I could to find out if he was a charlatan, if he was playing us all as suckers. I was kind of in my own mind, narcissistically putting myself between Lou and history at that time, because I was like, I was kind of harsh in my judgment. I was like, if this SOB thinks he's going to come out and do XYZ with this information. And then I met him, and I think we've all had a chance to meet him a little bit since then. And I don't know what anybody else expected, but that's one of my best friends now. I mean, I'll as I always say, I'll use a line from The Godfather. I'll go to the mattresses for that guy, any
Yeah.
day, so.
And speaking of Lou and say you're friends with him now, on Tucker Carlson the other night when Lou was on, he mentioned SkyFort. So people have seen some of the pictures now, the website. Can you explain to us what SkyFort is?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We're very proud of SkyFort. We have not gotten to the point where we're ready to launch completely and showcase ourselves, but SkyFort coalesced because we saw that there was a vacuum of support. Whether it was Luis or myself or other, in this case, military witnesses. In this case specifically, there were people that wanted to tell their stories. They wanted to come out. They wanted to help say what was going on, say what they'd seen, but we were scared. It takes a lot of courage to come out and talk about this. I think everybody in this community understands that. And so we had an opportunity to support each other. And just like a lot of us did with the Big Phone Home and some of the other activist events that we've done in the last 6 months, I felt like we could do better in supporting each other. And there were other people that agreed with me. And so when the Big Phone Home coalesced, there were some of us that realized, this whole networking between each other, instead of trying to hide, everything in your own soup bowl and get the most views and get the most attention and be the biggest hit and all that, that's garbage. We're not getting anywhere with that. You've got a bunch of narcissistic, and no offense to anyone specifically, but you've got a lot of narcissistic individuals that are all about them. And they're trying to make a name for themselves as a influencer celebrity in a niche. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to expose the truth, expand a conversation, and support people with a aversion to further harm. So that's what SkyFort is. SkyFort is here to support each other, to expand the conversation, to connect professionals and network professionals together so that they can expand the conversation, to make more Lou's, more Sean's, more James's, and people that can go out there and talk about this in a way that doesn't bring nonsense and stigma to it, and that keeps uncovering more of this phenomenon for all of us. But where the first time any of us ever got the attention of the general public seems to be as our military started noticing these things on the edges of their operation areas. That's just what happened. And that's where we are right now. It doesn't mean 6 months to a year or later or whatever that the conversation is still going to be exactly the same. That's going to be up to the rest of us. So I think my folks, I hate to say my folks, because it's a team. It is 100% an equal team that sometimes is pulling its hair out, trying to find the best ways to work together, and sometimes works as smooth as water flowing down the hill. But we lean into it with our hearts. This is all about support, harm reduction, networking, and expanding the conversation for us.
Awesome. And so people are aware of the members that are in SkyFort. Can you go ahead and mention them?
Sure. SkyFort is made up of 3 people. It's myself, Jesse Springer, and Jake Mann. The 3 of us we are SkyFort. Luis Elizondo is on our advisory board. Beyond that, we didn't intend to go public this week. Tucker caught us by surprise. I have to be honest about that. So beyond that, we'll have more to announce in the future. But we are a team of equals. We intend to be transparent. Our advisors will be transparent, and our advisors will speak on their own behalf. There is no agenda here.
Sure. I appreciate you discussing that with us and for the audience, and I'm highly anticipating what comes forward with SkyFort, and I'm sure a lot of us are going to have support for you there as well, and we're looking forward to it.
Well, let me add lastly, it's made up of a group of friends who now consider themselves family. We've been doing this, some of us, for almost 3 years now. We've been doing it pro bono. We haven't taken a single nickel for this. We finance this out of our own pockets, from our own endeavors, and it's a passion for us, and we are truly dedicated to this. So if people want to help, don't hesitate to reach out. We need all the help we can get. Networking and expanding the conversation is what we want to do.
Absolutely, and I think it's important you mentioned that. Now, getting on to some of the current events, everybody knows that the UAP Task Force report is due later this month. There's already been some news about it, and what a source told the media. But what are some of your initial thoughts on the UAP Task Force report coming?
It's a mixed bag for me, because on the one hand, I'm incredibly excited, like the rest of us, that this is actually happening. But on the other hand, I want to remain realistic about my expectations and about how the government works and how getting things done works within the government. Excuse me. I'm hearing rumblings myself of a possible delay. I'm hearing rumblings of possible, I don't want to say lack of cooperation, but I guess that's the best I can do, because nothing else popped into my head. But a lack of cooperation with some departments. I think in some cases that's ridiculous, because the data clearly exists. So where we go next would be to point straight at it and then and ask for it again, I suppose. But that's me speculating. I want to see the task force provide us with whatever they were able to get. Doesn't matter what it is, it's going to show us what the next steps are. I believe that this is being ensconced in history and in the public perception and conversation. I don't believe we're going back. But I'm not going to be satisfied until we see a permanent entity that's providing transparent, unclassified reports to the American public, which obviously would then be shared with the world. And also bringing in the right kind of people that can comb through the classified data to decide how to sanitize and explain the things that we all need to understand now.
Yeah, because I know one of the concerns is that, you know, the task force itself is only able to obtain, you know, certain information. And, you know, for instance, if there was a special access program that was housing some kind of UAP research, you know, the question is, would they have access to anything like that?
I think that we'll have to wait for the task force to tell us that. Their authority seems to be pretty blanket, but what the question is do the legality of the semantics match the constitutionality of the request? I don't know. We'd have to ask lawyers about that. But yeah, it's gonna reveal a lot, and it's gonna be up to the rest of us to quickly be able to filter that data and realize where we turn next as advocates.
Yeah, and speaking of lawyers, you know, we know that Daniel Sheehan is now assisting Lou Elizondo regarding the Inspector General, and now, you know, from what we've heard, emails that have been deleted, where they kind of, in admitting to that, cornered themselves almost. What are some of your thoughts on that?
In general, I think Mr. Sheehan is good at what he does, and I'll leave that portion of Lou's engagement to Danny. But I do have to say, on the note of the Department of Defense or elements within it deleting Lou's emails from the record, I don't even know what to say about that. That in itself would be an entire different investigation all in its own, as to why that happened, what was the motive behind this, and who were the personnel who decided to truly try to delete the record, and why. As far as the IG, as far as the investigation by the Inspector General itself, we know of 3 vectors of investigation right now, as far as I'm aware: the UAPTF, the DoD IG, and the it would seem some kind of personal investigation that Mr. Sheehan's representing for Lou. That's a lot of eyes on this. It seems like everybody pointing at each other kind of like this right now, and on the one hand, I'm heartened by that, because the more heads that pop up and say WTF, the better. But this is to me, this is a time that we all have to be pretty careful with some of these details, because a DoD IG will not release any information ahead of time. It will not release the information until it's completely done. If there is a personal investigation involved, we will not get any of that data. It's not ours to get. That is personally protected data, and you know, there's Privacy Act involved. But the UAPTF report and the UAPTF and the congressional request still remain. So do I think that those investigations are going to inform the severity and the seriousness of the UAPTF report? Very much so. I think there's an energy around this that says, kind of, nobody better screw this up this time. People are watching.
Now, if you had like a super optimistic outlook, right, a hope for what would occur with the UAPTF report and its release, maybe some of the information that might be involved, and where we went from there, what would be your highest hope?
My highest hope for that first report would be a recommendation of a national think tank, ways and means ahead to provide the funding and infrastructure for that, recommendations for personnel to fill it out. I would love to see the UAPTF be able to provide us some kind of broad post-World War II timeline of what investigations did occur, any of the major findings, whether they believe that some of those investigations were done in good faith or not. We can look to Blue Book, for example, where it would seem that there was a portion of Blue Book that was there to cover this up, for lack of a better word. And if we look at the efforts of J. Allen Hynek following Blue Book, he dedicated his life to the opposite of what it seemed that he had been doing for Blue Book. It seemed to really pain him to have to look people in the eye and say that these fantastic events were explained by something simple and prosaic when he knew they were not. I would love to see this completely legitimized. I would love to see it, this foundational baseline placed there with an expectation for the future. We all understand that government is people, and people are our neighbors and our friends and our family and the people that we like and the people that we dislike. It's not an edifice or an entity. It's a group of people. So if we don't make this permanent, it's because we didn't work hard enough. And if after the report comes out, we don't get what we want out of that report, it's because we as constituents let it slide and just said, screw it. And we've never had this amount of people paying attention pragmatically. And I know you and I have talked about the edges of this before, where I've been very careful as to what I've wanted to participate in or not, because I didn't want people, when they look back, getting the wrong idea at the wrong time, I guess, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because you and I know you and I could talk for a day, just like Jay and I did yesterday. We could talk for a whole day on consciousness.
Oh yeah.
But we would scare so many people away because they've never really considered their own consciousness, very much. So I've kind of ranged afar with this, but my most optimistic hopes would be to see this be permanent, transparent, because we all know there's edges of this that got to stay top secret. There's edges of this that, to me, the technology, in my opinion, is far too dangerous to just have it posted on the internet. Should everybody get it? Yes, but there have to be checks and balances and safeguards and operational risk, management on as we transition towards this technology, if it's going to be that simple. Which I don't think it's just that simple, because as far as I'm aware, they're not landing and identifying themselves to anybody in authority. Let me put it that way.
Sure.
So.
And now, speaking of UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, I know we did an Ask UFO Twitter video on this, and I thought it was really fun to see everybody's perspective.
Yeah.
What is your thought on some of the possibilities of what could be the intelligence or the source of UAP?
To me, it's most because I've taken in as much evidence as I could in the last few years. There are so many disparate points of evidence in what investigators and popular culture call ufology or the phenomenon, that to me, to put them all under one umbrella is a mistake. But that's where we are right now. So I don't believe in a one source phenomenon. I've often been quoted as saying that I believe that some of the phenomenon shares a medium. Now, whether I'm not a physicist or a scientist, when I say that, I'm quoting people who discuss things like hyperspace and higher dimensions or other dimensions. So I don't want to completely conflate all of the phenomenon together. I think a lot of us who are in the community, as we say, understand that there are things that appear to be nuts and bolts craft that people report have physical sentient inhabitants in them. And then there seem to be other things of varying size and shape that seem to be more energetic, less solid, and perhaps even more in tune with consciousness than materialism, if that makes sense to folks. And so I think if we're going to call all of that the same phenomenon, we have to find the point where they all coincide. And I'm not 100% sure that just everything weird that we don't understand should fall under one umbrella, other than reality or esoteric science. Or I don't know if we need new language for it. I fear that we do. I know that people don't like it. Some people think changing or using the phrase UAP, they literally say, well, I like UFO. And it's like, man, that's a really immature response, first of all. But because they're not all objects, and most of these things are not exhibiting flight characteristics, so they're not flying. So if it's not a solid object and it's not exhibiting flight characteristics, and you just see it in the air, all you have is an unidentified phenomenon. to me. So that's why I use those words. And sorry, it's been this whole week for me has been all about semantics with this.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wrapped around that axle.
Well, and you know what? Not for nothing, a little pragmatism, it works. You know, the UAP, you know, although it's not necessarily a new term, the way that it was brought out, it's been effective. It's worked. It helped alleviate and, you know, buffer some of the stigma until now. I mean, I think people will figure it out on their own, like, oh, UAP is UFO. I mean, some of them, they get it right off the bat, right? But it's still, it's more comfortable for people who are maybe, you know, more careful about being identified themselves as somebody who's interested in UFOs. And if they want to have a conversation with somebody and they say UAP, it's like, oh, you know, people kind of understand that new terminology and it's safer, you know, for some people. So if that's, you know, if it works, it works.
Well, for a lot of people, if you say UFO, they'll go, do you mean flying saucers? And so you've got folks in the community that would immediately go, no, 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 that's not what I mean at all. And they, you know, they would want to correct someone else's semantics. But for them, you know, for some folks, a soda is a Coke, no matter what flavor it is, depending upon what region you're in.
Yeah.
Or it's a pop. So these semantics arguments are really holding us back. No one's trying to pull one over on anybody. We're still pointing at the same stuff and trying to show you the same videos. You know.
Well, and it's important too, because people said, oh, you know, maybe if they're using UAP, they're going to try to erase the past. But, you know, here on Tucker Carlson, you have Lou Elizondo with a you know, 70-year-old document from 1950 talking about UFOs and nuclear facilities.
100%.
So nobody's trying to erase the history. And no. You know, Christopher Mellon and Elizondo have went on the record, you know, questioning the veracity of crash retrieval, saying, you know, it's a serious matter and we should look here. You know?
Yeah. So there are aspects of this there's no reason that it has to be painted with and again, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it doesn't have to be painted with a convention niche brush. You know, it can be looked at completely scientifically as if it's a new science and things like that, because there are people that are coming to this for the first time and they're not interested in ufology whatsoever. They want nothing to do with it. And so that's part of that. There's going to be a blending here, because if the people that consider themselves part of a culture or a constituency that we call ufology or UFO Twitter or experiencers, etc., and we continue to have this adversarial nature towards the folks that were from government or military that are trying to help with this, you know, this constant static between those communities, it's not serving anybody. It's not helping forward the conversation. And in some veins, it's creating animosity that's making it impossible to communicate and cooperate. So I guess part of this for me is I want to get rid of the demonization between the two sides of this community. You know what I mean? We have to figure out the difference between our urban myth and legend, the stuff that, frankly, well, I don't even want to mention it, but we all know that there was a conglomerate of conspiracy theories under a specific letter that we've all heard about in the last few years. That has done more to destabilize the truth, done more to sow chaos into an already fragile community than anything else. And I encounter people who have had their own real life experiences, but they've been pulled into this web of nonsense. And I cannot interface with them anymore because they're so stuck in this lore that they believe is the only reality. And I'm not experiencing that reality.
Yeah, I hear you, man. And, you know, now talking about, I guess you want to say people in that greater public and influencers and different people from outside the UFO community. You know, we had somebody, Sam Harris, comment recently on UAPs, and dude, I was waiting for a few years. I was like, please, Sam Harris, please touch this topic somehow. And he went out and spoke about it, and you know, it was pretty amazing. You know, his perspective, I thought, was so sober and rational. And you know, I was a little afraid he was going to be a little dismissive, but not at all. I think he nailed it right there. And I think there's going to be an entire domino effect from somebody like Sam Harris, you know, basically allowing people to have this conversation and address it like he did in a very centered and intellectual way. So what are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, Sam is Sam's a hero of mine.
Yeah,
He's where I started with meditation. He's where I send other people to start, because while I didn't end up at the end of towards the end of my practice as an atheist, um, I think it was a good starting place for me, because my spiritual makeup was pretty messed up after a lifetime of I raised Catholic, left that early, um, and then sampled a little bit of everything and turned my back on the lot for a long time.
yeah,
So I think Sam's a really good place to start. He's like a blank slate when it comes to meditation, and I appreciate that. And he doesn't say this is what's inside and this is what you'll find when you do it. He says this is the substrate, and beyond that, he lets go of your hand and it's up to you. And at least that's the way I see it.
yeah,
Um, but Sam's outlook on this, I think that he just made millions of would-be intellectuals raise an eyebrow and go, really?
yeah, yeah,
And take a deep breath and go, hold on a second. So that thing I saw on CNN or Fox News or whatever, your flavor of outlet is the other night, that had merit. Um, I think you're right. I think that we could really see the tide rush out pretty quickly on this. Um, I'd love to talk to Sam, but I'm not worried about it. If Sam and Lex are having those conversations and those are the conclusions they're coming with, that's the conversational expansion that makes my dreams come true. And I get to sit back and watch that, because it's going to be incredible when people of Sam's caliber really bite into this.
yeah. And he also, in one of those, I know you shared the video before. I listened to it this morning. He was saying that he was speaking to a former head of the CIA and somebody from and one of the naval offices to have a conversation about, regarding how, people may be interpreting this as fearful or some of the conspiracies behind it. And they were going to talk about some of the communication on this. So I thought that's pretty incredible.
Oh, I think
Um,
those are the folks that I mean, if I could have my way, those are the folks I want Sam to talk to.
yeah,
There was when we needed Albert Einstein and Edward Teller and others to go to Washington, they did. If it's time for Sam and other great minds like him to go to Washington, well, damn it, let's get behind them, because
yeah,
we need them. We need them. We need those great minds attacking this.
yeah, for sure. Now, on speaking of Sam Harris and meditation, uh, you know, I know you're into meditation. I'm into meditation. We're kind of in that same, Dharma world, whatever you want to call it. Do you find that meditation is helpful even in dealing with the UAP topic in any way?
Absolutely. It's I dare say it's the only thing I preach, is that mindfulness is the number one tool for a person who wishes to investigate the phenomenon, especially from a first person view. Um, you are the first point of your awareness. You are the first observer in the case or investigation that you intend to involve yourself in. So if your selfhood is muddied, or if it's covered with overlays and anxiousness and anxiety and too much grasping and want and need, when you encounter something truly unknown, you would be forced to overlay your emotional construct onto it. I want to be as balanced and in receive mode as possible, without any analytics of my own falling over my experience, because I've experienced enough weird in my life, and then been there for a famous weird thing, that it's given me pause when it came to discounting things in my life. So for me, meditation, it unveils the true human being. Um, for me, letting go of the person that was Sean and realizing that Sean, in my description, is the moss that grew on the cave that is something larger. The cave will remain when Sean's gone, and new moss will probably grow up in it. So I'm not as wrapped up in that anymore. But the times that I have forgotten my mindfulness are the times that this has gotten scary. The times that I have gotten away from my non-duality and gotten back towards egoic or selfish thinking, those are the times when this wasn't easy anymore, and it became something that was confusing. So for me, that's what it's about. It's that unencumbered humanity that I think is the most valuable piece of meditation and mindfulness in regards to the phenomenon. But I would say that if we're talking about, if we then are going to talk about contact modalities, I think, I'm really wary of those because they are anecdotal experience. And it's hard to take that anecdotal experience sometime and impress it on other people. And a lot of folks that get involved with these things, when it comes to bringing physical evidence to go with the anecdotal experience, a lot of times it feels too special to want to collect that data and to share it. But then folks want to still share the story. So bringing it around to what we kind of do for a living together, I want to find a way for that to be something we can trust the data on with each other, in the same way that, when you and I read a book on Dzogchen or Vipassana, we have enough experience with it that we trust the writer. I want to feel the same way about contact modalities and things like that.
And I'm glad you said that, and I really appreciate your view on it. I think it's solid. And I think, saying things the way that you say them, this is what we need to add to the conversation, not kind of what we've had over the last 20, 30 years of, people preaching their way and it being super, their way or the highway. I think that there needs to be a new way to approach the work and observe it and in a more objective way. So do you have any ideas of how maybe that could be, how you can go about doing something like that?
Well, there are a lot of consciousness studies out there being done. There's a lot of brainwave activity research being done. Between that, we've got the nuts and bolts on how to measure activity and how to try to determine if we have corresponding, brain activity with the anecdotal experience. Those are really good programs to look at and to run. But I would like to see a transparent, open attempt to take the science and not to come in debunking. We need a group of scientists that say, tell me your hypothesis. Well, my hypothesis is that based on anecdotal experience, there may be a way to communicate with some level of intelligence beyond the individuated human that we're aware of. Let's just say it that way. We would like you to help us determine if that is true. That's what science is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be, we got these BSers over here trying to make us look stupid, and we're going to come in and we're going to debunk this because we're skeptics. That's not the scientific method. Is somebody came to somebody one day and said, man, I think we could split this atom and get a lot of power out of it. Someone could have said, that's absolute nonsense. And it's not in the Bible, so we're not going to do that. And it's over. But every amazing advancement starts with somebody's wacky idea. So if you're over here on the spectrum that says this is a wacky idea, I mean, maybe we need to get grant money then, and we need to turn it into to motivate science or industry to do this. That's the thing. I don't like that. I don't like monetizing any part of this, because that's what we've seen in the past. We've seen the swindlers, the hucksters, and the people trying to get the money. They're still trying to do it. A lot of them are on fire right now, trying to figure out what's going on, because where's my audience going? They're looking at the news instead of my pay channel. So are we going to win this? I think so. I think this is going to be real. Is it a big threat narrative? No. Are some people going to utilize that? Of course, man. Some people utilize a threat narrative on every aspect of their life. People ask me, is there going to be an arms race? There's always an arms race. I haven't seen anybody going, oh well, UAPs are real, let's throw all the guns in the furnace. So assume humans are going to human, so we need to keep doing it better. That's why folks like you and I, that's why man, you're one of those people I try to really keep in touch with, because I can tell your heart, you have a huge heart. I can
Yeah.
tell you always lean into this with truly good intentions that you've examined ahead of time. And you curate your words, and you're careful because you know that they matter. We need more people that care that way, that truly want to help. So I'm very hopeful, man.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. Coming from you, that's awesome.
You're an inspiration for a lot of people, brother. You have a huge audience and a huge outreach. And dude, there's so many people that contacted me. They were so excited to find out I was coming on your show, to see us talking to each other. And I'm excited. I mean, you and I talk, we communicate as much as we can. We try to help each other out.
Yeah.
But bro, you change lives out there with the content you create and the people you talk to. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. And I hope I'm doing some good. I can do my part in any way that I'm, available to. But now, yeah, speaking of the threat narrative, that's one thing. Like I, that's something you can't just jump over that question. You have to kind of realize where people are at. For the first time in their life, they're understanding that this is a reality. Like 90% of people have just not, they thought it was fiction. So they're learning that this is real. So they're kind of, first of all, like Lou said, they're grabbing onto a train that's going 120 miles an hour and trying to catch up. So, for them to kind of take all that in at once, first of all, that's a little overwhelming for some people, because the first thing they're attaching to is all these different movies they've seen, and their subconscious program running through all these different scenarios, even below their awareness. And that bubbles up in different ways. So people are going to ask that question. You have to let them ask it. All right. And nobody's going to listen to you if you're telling them what to think. That's not even right. So I do think, yeah, there's the national defense issue, which of course, yeah, if you have somebody coming in and turning off nuclear, missiles, that's a concern. If it was Russia, we'd be concerned. So, people tend to have say, oh, it's the aliens, let's give them a pass,
Right.
But I understand both sides of the argument, and I appreciate them. But it's a conversation that needs to be had, and people can't just come around throwing answers.
Well,
So that,
let me pepper something in there for a second. And this
sure.
goes back to us, the fallacy that this is a 1-point phenomena.
Right.
We are at the bottom of a gravity hole of the entire universe. We've never been anywhere else. And we act like just because we don't hear the block parties going on all over the place, that the neighborhood's empty. There's a lot of folks out there that have had what they consider to be wonderful and fantastic experiences with what we all tend to call the phenomenon together. There are other people out there that have had absolutely terrifying experiences that have broken them for the remainder of their life and ruined their families and the things that have happened around them. Those two people completely disagree as to what we're dealing with. One of those people will get very angry with me if I indicate that they shouldn't mess with our nukes. They'll want to tell me, well, we should have never made nukes, and they'll just start playing this blame shame game about humanity. And look, man, I don't know what that thing is that's messing with the nukes. And I've got two sides, terrified and elated. That's the constituency. So where do we go with that? As a military member, I say, well, we need to figure out how to stop an unknown entity from screwing around with our nukes. Do I agree we shouldn't have nukes? Yeah, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
Who puts their knife down in a knife fight?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I guess what I want to say to folks who worry about a threat narrative is, well, be a constituent, get involved in your process. Because if you allow a threat narrative to come out from the military industrial complex that runs the same machine we're all looking at, that's fighting wars and making guns and doing all that, I don't need to get into that. That's our society right now, man. I'm not giving it a pass.
Yeah.
But I am saying that pardon me if I don't mean this to sound confrontational, so let me soften the tone a little bit, because I'm not attacking you, but you tell me, man, how come we were never able to get this on the national news before without it being laughed at? because it wasn't presented seriously. And now the military is going, look, we don't know what this is, but it's about time we told you this was going on. I don't know why either, but why hasn't it worked until now? So I guess it frustrates me, because just because I'm in the military doesn't mean I'm saying it's a threat, but it's my job to go, hey, there's something at the edge of the camp. I don't know what it is, and it can totally destroy us. And your opinion says it's benevolent, and your opinion says it's evil. Where am I supposed to go as a military member with that? Just stand by? Half of my interviews overseas ask why we didn't shoot it down in 04.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, well, I mean, that's not my first inclination either.
Yeah.
I don't go, oh God, unknown, destroy it. So
yeah.
it's, the threat narrative is something that's going to be up to us. If we let people out there demonize this issue and make it into a money-making fear machine, I don't know what to say, man. I think it says more about our culture than it does about, in general, than it does about the phenomenon.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think that's the point. And I think it's important for people to get involved in the conversation. And there's a few things. Like, number one, that people concerned about that, they need not be concerned about the phenomenon. We're not victimizing the phenomenon in any way. We're not going to pull one over on the phenomenon. So
Right.
that shouldn't be the concern for people thinking like, oh, poor ET, or what have you, extraterrestrial intelligence, sure. Ultra terrestrials, ultra dimensionals. But there's no way we're gonna somehow victimize or harm them in that kind of way. For all we know, all this military activity is instigated by them to kind of nudge us into this process. This could be a grand design for all we know.
In that case, let me speak on that for a minute, because 70 miles that way is where Tic Tac happened.
Yeah.
And that's our operational training area here off the coast. The entire fleet that's 5 miles that way plays out there all the time. So we've been there for years. This seems like it's encroaching into where we play. It's the activity is, this is my opinion, but we didn't change our op area.
Yeah.
So and we're not, there's no war going on 70 miles up. There's no war between the US Navy and UAP. It seems like we're watching them out there and trying to figure out what's going on. So they're not shooting at us, but are they harassing us? These are, again, semantics. As far as I know, we're not shooting them down because they're not a threat. There's something that's in the airspace and they're unknown. If they start shooting at our destroyers and our cruisers, I imagine we're going to have a different show on our hands. But I think what's important for our military folks is this: UAP is real. The phenomenon, as we call it, and these objects or these energetics, if we're going to put them on a spectrum, are real. Are our adversaries going to try to fake us out based on that fact? Seems pretty academic to me. Now we have to train our modern warfighters and allies in telling the difference between this aloof seeming technology that is running circles around us but doesn't seem to be shooting at us, and a adversary here that may want to utilize that to get us to do the wrong thing or destabilize the situation or something like that. So I hate to say this, I think you and I understand war's not ending tomorrow as far as I know, but there might be UAP in the theater during a war, and I don't want anybody shooting at a real UAP, because I don't know what's going to happen when that happens. So so it's a weird situation. As a modern warfighter, I'm like, I think I have to, if I were still in the Navy, I would have to train sailors on we would give them recce guides, reconnaissance guides. They would show you aircraft and stuff like that. In this case, it's like you need to show them, okay, this is a UAP, this is a probable balloon or something, So
and I don't think there's a question now that with all this hype in the media about UAP, there'll be some kind of designs from adversarial technology that's going to try to spoof it in some way, even if just to see what will happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But moving on, you know, I know this is kind of a loaded term, but what do you think, uh, disclosure would look like, or even just like partially, even what people are going through right now?
I think that word has been bandied about so much in the last couple of years. It may be one of the most overused words we have, and I don't know if any of us agree as to what the hell it means anymore.
Yeah,
For me, we're way past disclosure. A
yeah,
lot of us use the phrase confirmation, but
right.
if we get to confirmation and we're then waiting for epilogue, I'm not going to be too happy if we keep moving the word down the road. I would love to, for me, disclosure would be, give me at least one origin of one of these things. And
Oof.
origin being whether it's
Yeah,
AI, a people get so ticked when we say drones. Drone just means nobody's in it flying it.
yeah,
Okay, so if it's a non-human drone,
yeah,
if it's a craft that has a physical thinking animal in it, or some variation of that, or a non-biological, we've seen enough movies. I'm trying not to put the popular terms on them.
yeah,
I want to know what's in them too. I want to know. Maybe we can't know where they come from. How could we know where they come from unless A, they tell us, or B, we track them back to that destination?
right.
So when people are like, where are they from? Where do you think they're from? I'm like, the infinite universe above our heads, or
Yeah,
what's below my feet. Those are the only two options that I'm
yeah,
aware of. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
yeah, yeah. I think, I don't know. I think that's going to be. It's hard for me to imagine how that would roll out. Like, how are they going to tell people? Finally, after all these years, like, oh well, we found the origin of this other intelligence. Again, I mean, how would you even determine, where it's from, and unless you can just say
Right.
this object and whatever's in it, this technology is definitively not from our civilization. And if we got something like that, I think that would be incredible. And I
If
think,
we have tissue or material from a craft that has a different isotopic ratio, or that has a non DNA based structure, or has a silicon base, or something like that, anything that we could immediately say this is non-local to Earth,
yeah,
would be incredible. And from, I don't know that we can get the fine point disclosure we hope for, like you're saying, but man, we can do better. Well, right now we're at UFOs are real.
yeah,
And we're trying to hold on to that. That's like right here, and there's slippery slopes on both sides. But I do, to me, disclosure, true disclosure, would be these are non-human, definitively in some cases, and that would be I mean, and Lou said stuff like that, but we're all, well, he hasn't said it like that. He said
yeah,
he believes, based on the evidence that's available, that these are probably not in the human arsenal, and I agree with that.
yeah,
But if an entity of the United States government could come out and tell us that is a true statement, that would be disclosure to me.
yeah, yeah. And you know, I really hope we see something like that. I'm kind of, hopefully, I'm optimistic, but I'm still
Mhm.
skeptical that we'll receive something like that. But you know what? I've been surprised before. I was surprised with what happened in 2017. I was surprised with 60 Minutes, and
Yep,
it's got momentum now, and I don't think that's going to slow down at this point.
I agree.
Yeah. So, just where would you like to see the UFO research field go from this point?
As much as people in the UFO field can get they use the term scientism sometimes. I still completely believe in the scientific method. I believe in our academic structure. I think that our the way that we learn and peer review could be a little more merciful, a little more mirthful, and imaginative, I think. But for me, it's I really want to see this permanent, public, respected, a national lab, think tanks. I don't want to see this just glommed onto by industry, and commercial aspects that are going to see, going to look around the what the heck is it to the real world applications quickly. I feel like you and I understand that there's a psychological and consciousness aspect to this that isn't immediately apparent, whether it's personal perception, personal psychology, or something larger that we're all involved in. I want to see that piece broken out into the open too and discussed. And eventually we're going to need to look at the yucky parts of this, as I call them, the parts
Yeah.
that none of us want to talk about on these shows, because when you go down those rabbit holes, you lose the whole audience because it's too dang weird. But we got to get there someday.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And also, just if you have some words of wisdom, which you usually do, words of wisdom, or just some words to researchers that you would, like a take home for them, some advice for some of the listeners, or something along those lines.
I try to apply this to my daily life and my life at large. I try to ask myself, what do I want out of something? Not in a selfish way, but in an honest way. What are my actual expectations, and what would make me feel balanced? Not happy, not elated or over the moon, as they say, but what would make me feel as the most human as I could? For me, it's authenticity. So when I try to, I say attack the subject, but I don't come at it in an aggressive stance. I try to come at it in a receiving stance. I try to take things in and see how they resonate with me. And words like resonate and stuff like that, those are new words for me in the last decade. But I think we all understand what harmony means. And when this feels harmonious, but not elated, I think that's the natural spot it's supposed to be in. When it feels like it hurts, your rudder's off. So it's not supposed to feel like you're over the moon all the time when you're researching this, and it's not supposed to feel like you're under somebody's boot. When it feels like it's flowing and it's effortless, that's when you're on the right track. And I think if we apply that natural intuitiveness to the phenomenon, I think it helps us. I think it helps us with our research. A lot of people are going to go, what the hell did he just talk about? What the hell did he just say? And unfortunately, those are the folks that may not get what I mean. But if you, for a minute, even know that letting go a little bit more brings more back, then that's what I would say, is allow yourself to be a little more intuitive with this and to flow into it.
Cool, love it. And just people know you were a meditation teacher for a while. If people were interested in meditation, where would you guide them?
I tend to lead them towards Sam Harris, but I usually say any mindfulness meditation that focuses on breath, mantra, or things like that are a good place to start. But I will say this is a modern society. You don't have to go back to India or to some of the older techniques to find a little bit of peace. Just sitting down in a chair and listening to some of your favorite music that has a nice positive vibe to it, and thinking, I know some people are going to be turned off by this, but thinking positive, loving thoughts about those people in your life and the situations you're in, and using your imagination in a healthy and positive way, is something that can bring more peace, joy, and understanding to your life than just about any other thing out there. So I go back to that. Spending time with yourself with love is the greatest thing that you can do for the other people around you.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And just for possible things coming up, or where can people find your work, and what might be coming up soon?
At the moment, I'm lagging with my website, but it's mintyhyperspace.com. That's my handle that I use on most platforms, Twitter, and I have a small Instagram account. There's a lot of things that are coming up for us, but those things are, I think you understand that a lot of things are proprietarial. We have our eyes out on the eyes out for the 180-day report. We have some big name folks that want to speak out about this, and they want to step forward, and that's part of what my folks with SkyFort are helping do, is help those folks feel confident enough to take the microphone and tell their story. But I don't see this going away. I see this expanding because the conversations that we're having right now, as we say, behind the scenes, are at the very highest levels that we could ever hope for. And the seriousness that this subject is being given has never been even touched before. The fact that we're seeing a backlash from some of the some mainstream science is expected, but we're also seeing some pretty big names in mainstream science really give this a pragmatic look and say, hey, who can I talk to about this? I'd like to understand it a little bit more. I hope that we keep volunteering to help those folks understand this, because they're going to be the ones that go forward to end up informing the other 7 billion of us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Sean. I love this conversation. I hope to have many more, and I hope to speak to you again soon, man.
Well, James, you got my number. Please hit me up anytime, man. I'd love to help you out with your work, and I know we need your help. So it was really a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it, my man. I'll see you around. Take care.
All right, brother. You too.